Welcome to Holly's Pandorium, featuring your host, psychic medium Holly Jordan.
Hey everybody, we're back. Yay! So I have with me again Sage. Hello, Sage. I'm so glad you're back. Sage and I have some fun stuff to talk about tonight. And so one of the things we wanted to do is just kind of expand on what Sage does a little bit and talk about who he works with a lot. And I wanted to start out just by kind of showing some visuals. So for you listening and my listening audience, bear with me. I'll try and describe this. So this is an image of a cartoon ghost I'm putting up on the screen. This is what most people imagine ghosts look like. You know, the white sheet, the big eyeballs, you know, maybe a mouth. That's what everyone imagines as a ghost. That's what's been used in social media and on television, movies for many, many generations. In reality, I'm switching the image. This is an image of some Confederate soldiers from the Civil War. This is actually what Sage sees. In color, people that have passed on from this time era. And so I just want to have you keep this in mind as you're listening. It's not Casper the ghost he sees real men and in their uniforms, and some of them are dirty. It's because that's where they were when they died, whatever that is. It's very real. It's not cartoony. So here we go. We're going to talk about that. So go ahead, Sage, and let's talk about who do you talk to and what are they? Who are they? What have they told you? What do you know about them?
Right. So who I primarily talk to are soldiers of the Civil War. Not all passed during the war. Not all were killed in battle. Some didn't even fight or die at the said battlefield that I found them at. Thing I found a lot with energy is energy connects to objects. Energy can connect to land. Energy can just be left behind as a memoriam to the person that was there. So, for instance, you know, just because like I met so many of these guys, I'm looking at my list on my phone that I've met at a specific battlefield that they didn't even die at. They just fought there. And just because they fought there, they left a piece of themselves behind that they can go back and forth to these places. And more times than not, that's where I find them and find out later that they either survived the war or passed on later in the war. But for whatever instance, that's where I happened to find them at. Not all wore the same colored uniform. About 97% of mine are Confederate soldiers. Handful in the conception of the number that's with me is of the Union Army, the Northern Army. And it's just amazing to me that they both sides now understand the war's over and we're just one big happy family. And, you know, when time comes to shove, they'll be standing side by side defending against whatever it is that needs, you know, pushed away. And it's incredible because I still see them as if they're getting ready to march into their battle. You know, they're full gear to the, you know, every detail. Like they literally just woke up and their unit just got called into action. And it's incredible. It really is.
So I just want to expand for our listeners and our viewers. So Sage is like me in the sense that he sees and hears people that have passed on. So we get a visual and we hear them. We can talk to them. So one of the amazing things that Sage has been able to do is get their names when they're willing and able to share their names. Sometimes they have nicknames they'd rather go by, and that's okay too. We're respectful of that. But he's actually got a list of names and he's researched these folks, found them, found more information about them, and gotten to know them on a much more personal level. So this isn't ghost hunting like you might imagine or ghost research like you might be used to hearing about. This is on a whole nother level. Sage is very unique and he has a very different relationship with these spirits. They hang out with him and they're welcome around him for however long they want to be at. But they also have more recently been very helpful to Paige and people around, or Sage around him, to help him with dark forces. So let's talk a little bit about your list. Can you kind of show that on the screen really quick, what you showed me a minute ago?
Yep. So I'll try to get this without a glare if I can.
That's okay. It's a
That's
list
hard
of
to-
names that
Yeah.
he's got typed in his phone. So tell me about that list.
So
What do you
it all started. That's the whole list right there. But it all started in 2022. We were on an investigation in Ohio, and the place was a known haunted location, but had tied to the Underground Railroad. And there was a story of a bounty hunter. And the story to me and my friend, who's a psychic medium as well, just never sat right. Like it wasn't a preferred occupation. Like there's just something about the story that seems slightly fabricated, but who are we to judge? Like we never been before, just all
Right.
based off of lore and what we've heard through TV.
Right.
And we get there, and it was just me, her, and another friend, and we immediately got drawn to the barn where he was hung. And we like kind of just like walked in and like looked around, and it felt incredibly peaceful. And everyone always says about how the barn, you can't investigate the barn without being chased out. It's this dark place, blah blah blah, whatever. And we could have just fell asleep there. Like it was incredibly peaceful. And we looked at each other and went, I think we know who this is. And we turned and walked away or whatever. And we like did our preliminary walkthrough. Mind you, we had this building for like 16 hours. It was some stupid long investigation. So we went back to the hotel, gave it some time to settle down, let the energy settle down, and then drove back to the location a little bit later on in the evening. And we walked in, and it was just like, okay, we're ready for you, like kind of, feeling. And the first person to greet us was this bounty hunter. And he introduced himself, and we were kind of like, wait, it's like, that's odd. So we went up to the tour guide who was still there, and we said, hey, do you know a name for the bounty hunter? And she said, well, one person has documented that the name that they got when asking that question was James. Or I think it was I can't remember his name. It might have been James. I don't remember.
That's okay.
He turned and she turned and looked at me and goes, that's the name I just got whenever like he introduced himself. And like the lady like looked at us like pale as a ghost and was like, what? And she goes, yeah, like we're both mediums, and he just walked up and greeted us and told us his name. And she goes, that's crazy. And she was like, I've never had anyone like actually confirm that before. So with us being us, we usually focus on who talks to us, primarily, even though the location could be filled with spirits, whoever comes to us is who we talk to. So the whole night we sat and talked to this one individual because he's who wanted to talk. Found out he's originally from Maine, fought at the first Battle of Manassas under the Maine flag. After the battle was disgraced on how the Union Army was formed, and actually moved to Virginia and switched sides and fought the entirety of the war for the Confederacy. And then after the war, after his enlistment was up, he needed money, and the only job available was bounty hunting. And he said he wasn't proud of the work because he didn't agree with what was being done in those times as far as bounty hunting goes. And but he said like I needed to pay my for my family somehow.
Of course.
And he said whenever he got to the house and they told him to leave, he said like I'm not, like it's not the end of the world, like I'm just trying to do my job. They told me to leave, I'm leaving. But the family followed him back to his camp, arrested him, took him to the barn, and hung him.
Oh,
because they were very anti-slavery and
Sure.
all that in
Sure.
Ohio. And him being of the other side colors, for say,
Okay.
that's kind of how that prescribed. And when we started talking, it was like, that makes so much sense on why you came to us, knowing that we both have passions for the Civil War. And at the time I didn't know of anything because like my mediumship was like very bare minimum, like just learning.
Sure.
And we started talking to him, and we were like, let's see if he'll talk to us on the spirit box. So, we turned on our SB7 spirit box, and she did, then goes, hey, if you're still here, can you say your name? And he said his name, and then right after another name came through. And I was like, now who's this other voice? So again, I said, can you confirm, like, where are you from? And he said, Virginia. Then right after another voice went, Alabama. And I looked at my friend. I said, now, who the hell is this other person?
Right.
I was like, I'm really confused. Like, who is this person?
Mm-hmm.
So she goes, who, the person from Alabama, like, where are you, like, who are you with? Like, how'd you get here? I'm with Sage. Crystal clear. And I turned and looked at her. I was like, now, who the hell is this? Like, what? This is all new to me. Like, I had
Sure.
no idea.
Right.
So she asked his name, and he goes, Jameson. And I was like, that's not what you go by, though, is it? And that's like when my ability really started to like amp up.
Mm-hmm.
And he just said no. And I said, I'm getting the name Jamie. And he's like, yeah, that's what I go by is Jamie.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, my birth name's Jameson. My parents call me James, but I prefer Jamie. I was like, you're just like me. You're complicated as hell. I love it. So
Sage, how long ago was this?
3-4 years ago now.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit longer.
Okay.
But I just started talking to him. I was like, this is crazy. It was like, I didn't know, like, I had somebody with me. And I said, when did I meet you? And he said, since you were 12. And then
wow.
Because I knew exactly where I found him from.
Yeah?
He came with me whenever I visited the Antietam battlefield for the very first time when I was in middle school.
Oh, okay.
And I remember very, very, very strongly on that battlefield, like I always read ghost stories and stuff. Like I'm a nerd too.
Sure.
But I very, very, very strongly remember getting to a certain part and just stopping and going, I need to sit. Like I just need to take this spot in for some reason. And
Okay.
little did I know that was the position of his unit during the battle.
Wow.
No clue until all these years later when I actually had enough research and knowledge to understand what I was looking for.
Right.
And I started, talking to him more, and I was just mind blown. I said, hey, like, no disrespect to you, but like, we're going to finish out with him and then I'll get to you whenever we get home. Cause obviously you're very comfortable with.
Right. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got home and I said, she lives, a few states over. So we got on video chat and I said, okay, I said, Jamie, if you're still here, I want you to help us out here. Like, I want to get to know you more. So he gave us his name again, and then he told us his regiment number, and that we found him at Antietam. And I was like, oh, okay. So we were actually able to take his name and search it in our national database for soldiers and sailors, and I was able to find his entire military record.
Nice.
And found out he enlisted in the latter part of 61 as a drummer boy because he wasn't old enough to fight yet.
Wow.
And by 1862, they were hurting for men. So he was promoted to rifleman, basically. He was, I think he was only a corporal at the time of the Battle of Antietam. But he was in the 6th Alabama with the kid that he grew up with that he refers to as his brother. And they fought side by side at Antietam. And somehow in the latter part of the retreat, his brother was fatally wounded, and he never he didn't have a chance of saving him because they were crossing Antietam Creek when he was hit and basically drowned. Tragic, very tragic.
So do you have any idea how old he was when he got promoted?
17, maybe 18. He was only 24 when he died.
That's just so sad.
Yeah. So, they're both extremely young. I still see him as, he shows himself to me as like a late teen, early 20s.
Sure.
Because he didn't present himself that well after the war. He kind of is more proud of that time period.
Sure. To be fair. Yeah.
Yeah. And whenever I started learning about that and I traced his footsteps and I looked to see where the 6th was during the battle, that's when it like clicked to me. I was like, oh my God, that's where I sat down when I went.
Oh my God.
I was like, what are the odds of that? Like, that's bizarre. So, he started telling me more about himself, and he was from Birmingham, Alabama. He was the son of 2 Irish immigrants that came over in the late 40s, 1840s, that is. And then he kind of just came into his own with, just, the cause, call to arms. And the thing that I learned recently, especially coming from my own Irish heritage, is understanding why the immigrants decided to pick up the gun during the war. And in the South, it was more of a what they call the pro free Irish army, the revolutionaries. They found their way down south, and a lot of the Southern Irish were revolutionists of the Irish cause, where a lot of the Northern Irish were more pro to the freedom of just, let's just be free and happy. Like this,
Right.
like who cares?
Right.
I mean, there was some on both sides that kind of intertwined, but that was kind of the line that was drawn. And he just kind of like explained that to me, and I was like, oh, neat, whatever. And he actually started teaching me some Gaelic, so like I'm able to translate some stuff that I see, on the internet, and just stuff I find and research. And it's just funny, like I'll see something pop up and I'll know exactly what it says, even though I don't even know what it says or how to read it, but I know what it means.
Right.
It just, that's what they do.
Right.
And he just taught me so much about him, just like out of nowhere. It was like, it's like I'm meeting somebody new. Like he's literally telling me stuff about him. And it gets to the point where my dreams at night were like watching the war through his eyes, like I was watching a movie. And I remember one night he showed me a camp he was out in Alabama, and it was in the woods, and I could see tombstones just everywhere, and found out it was a military hospital and graveyard. And a lot of the troops were walking around with like bandanas wrapped around their face, and down was like a makeshift mask.
Right. Yeah.
You can see the campfires, tents, and then the fresh graves off to the side. And I remember asking him, I was like, where, like, what was this place? Where was this? He goes, this is where we trained. He said, we were short on camps in the South, unlike the North. And I was like, that's pretty graphic that you trained at a hospital like that.
With a cemetery right there. How in your face is that?
Yeah. And he said, that's just how it was. Like, that was just the closest camp.
Wow.
And I was like, goodness. And I was like, I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm trying to like track the time period of when this would have been. And so this would have been like kind of the spring of 1862.
Okay.
And because the war started the very late of 61. So like this is like still new, but like that's just showing the rampage that's already ravaging throughout the South. They're bringing their own home and burying them, anywhere they could basically. And I remember I asked him in my dream, I said, what was the name of this camp? And he told me, and I wish I still had it written down. I must have deleted or lost it, with all my notes. But I wrote it down, when I woke up like from my dream, right when he said that, and I wrote it down. And I went back to bed because I was exhausted. And I woke up and looked it up. And would you not believe, I found the place. There was all that's left is like a historical marker. And it says, here was the camp, blah, 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 whatever. And it literally says on the historical sign, used as training grounds and burial ground for dead Confederate soldiers.
Yeah.
And I just was like, he literally showed me that.
Yeah. So for anybody watching and listening, it doesn't get much better than that. When you connect with spirit or spirits, plural, and they actually get to share details and you can back it up with traceable facts. There's a lot to unpack there. I mean, we're talking about Sage going back in time with this spirit watching stuff from someone else's memories, literally. And how that's possible, we have no idea. We just know that we know.
Yep. And I'm not kidding. Like it's like you're watching a movie because that's the perspective. Like your whole dream is not just like a blurry image. Like it's literally like stepping back in time in his shoes. Like you're living his life. It doesn't like I like she said. I don't think I'll ever understand it, but it's so crystal clear until you wake up and realize that was a dream. You're like, holy smokes! Like this is happening.
Right.
That continued for weeks. Just random stuff of seeing it through his eyes, what he went through, and just so I understood like, hey, like this is what I went through. And I asked him, I said, I don't like asking this question to anybody. I said, but were you killed in battle? And he goes, no, I survived the war. And I looked at him, I said, but you're so young, like what happened? And he goes, that place in Birmingham that you want to go to? And I was like, what, Sloss Furnace? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, what about Sloss? He goes, I was murdered there. And I like stopped, and I was just like, excuse me? He goes, yeah, it was no more than a year or two after the war. That's where he worked after the war, to help rebuild the South. And there was somebody that didn't exactly agree with him being an immigrant and gave him a friendly shove into the furnace. And that was that.
That's brutal.
And I looked at him because like I had I literally was like almost ready to cry, and I was just like,
Yeah.
what? He goes, I survived the whole war just to get pushed into a furnace. And it was kind of like one of those things that like
that's overwhelming.
It clicked with me of like why my pull has always been to learning more about the Southern Army.
Yeah.
To me, like I keep politics aside, I keep the history aside.
Right.
Because God knows anybody that loves history will understand that there's good in the bad and there's bad in the good.
Right.
That's just how it is.
Mm-hmm.
And when I start learning about these individuals, of course, shocker here that almost all of them are Irish. Who'd have ever guessed? But like all of them came up as immigrants that are farmers and were trying hard to find a new life.
Right.
And they got treated like the bottom of the barrel just because they're not from the country.
That's right.
It just, that was like kind of something that like always just stuck in me like a thorn. I was just like, I got to learn more about this. I have to understand more about this. And these are the people that are struggling to get a voice, and like they're the ones that flock to me.
Right.
And God knows now after Jamie, I'm down to, I don't know, probably about 40 names on this list, and I have, as my last adventure, known almost 200.
Yeah.
A lot of them don't want to talk, but the ones that do talk, it's just like, here's my whole life and just lay it all out.
Right.
And it's sometimes overwhelming because when I open that veil up and like say like, hey, like who wants to talk? It's almost like they all start going at one time. Like, guys, please, one at a time. Like, I promise we will all talk, but like one at a time. Because it gets confusing. You think you're talking to one person, then another one starts talking, and then the things start getting intertwined. And I'm like, well, who am I talking to now? Because now I'm confused.
See, that's why I love the show Ghosts.
Mm-hmm. That show's hilarious.
It's like, yes, you can finally see what happens. They all get excited, and just like regular people do, sometimes they vie for attention by wanting to get their voice heard. So they start chatting, and thankfully I can hear the different voices, but it's still overwhelming because it's not like someone talking to your voice audibly outside that. It's different. And so I don't have anybody necessarily to really focus on. I just hear all this chatter.
Yes.
And so, yeah. So that's one of the reasons why I love the show Ghost. So if you haven't watched the show Ghost, for those listening and watching, please take a look at it. Just watch a couple episodes. That's what mediums go through all the time.
Every day.
When they're in a very haunted spot. It's a comedy. And again, Sage is totally spot on. For those that want to talk, it's like they haven't talked in years. They talk to each other, but they haven't talked to a live person in a flesh body. And they're so excited that you can hear them that they just want to share. They want to tell you where they've been, and they want to tell you the favorite thing that they miss about having a body. They miss doing something particular, or they miss their family, or they're making friends with you. They just kind of open up and talk to you. And it's amazing. It's amazing.
And it's so funny because there's so many different spectrums of them. Like there's some, like whenever I was at the Manassas battlefield, I was kind of drawn back because I have a blood ancestor that fought on the first day of the Civil War, the first Manassas. And I've asked a guide, I said, where exactly was this unit at? And he grabbed my map and literally marked an X and said, right here. He said, it's actually right beside the visitor center here. But he said, this is the exact, area where they were.
Mm-hmm.
So I, immediately walked right over to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, again, like the same sense I happened at Gettysburg. I had that rush of air just come across me, circle me, and go off. And I've always understood it as a sign of ancestors visiting.
Yes.
I just sat there and I was just taken back. And just kind of just tried envisioning it. And that's when I started hearing like distant cannon shots. Like my mind slipped back into that time period. And I remember looking over and seeing a young soldier just sitting there. And I like looked at him, he looked at me and goes, "Can you play a tune for me, please?" And I was like, "Sure." I was like, "Whatever you want." So I sat down beside him at the cannon and played a specific song for my Civil War playlist that is dedicated to the 69th, my ancestors' regiment. That was the Irish Volunteers that fought at
Mhm.
First Manassas. And he like looked at me and goes, "We're remembered," and just vanished. And so
It's amazing.
sometimes they don't need to follow me home or come with me to talk more. They just want a simple interaction and be like, that's all I wanted. And sometimes like, "Oh, we can talk. Cool. I'm coming with you." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Whatever you need. It's just funny to me because you never know what kind of interaction you're gonna get.
That's
And
absolutely true.
some
Absolutely
of them
true.
want to stay there for some odd reason and will come up, talk their piece, and then just walk back off into wherever they came from, and that's that.
Yeah.
I've had that happen at the wilderness. It
Mhm.
just you never know.
Right. Every experience with them is different. And I think that's one of the funnest parts about this is that you never know what's gonna happen. You
Yeah,
don't know who's gonna show up. You don't know what they're gonna say. Every time is different. No 2 experiences are identical. It's not like a TV show where there's gonna be comedy, there's gonna be romance, and a
yeah,
happy ending. It's a ghost experience. It's just like meeting a stranger,
yeah.
and you don't know what people are gonna say, and they are still people
Yep.
in every
That's it.
sense of the word.
I'm out of my list. I have a handful of names that I starred just so I know which ones I wanted to talk to because they're the ones that like I don't want to say they asked to be talked about, but like they're the ones that
Okay.
are most important to talk about. I
Okay.
mean, I could sit here for hours on hours trying to explain to you how I met every single one of these people.
Well, go for it.
Um,
Share a few of them with us.
I started with Jamie because he was my very first, and I mentioned
Okay.
his brother. He's with me. His name's right below him. Um, Next is the one that's always with me with Jamie. He goes by JJ. His name was Jeremy Jones. He was from North Carolina. Very quiet person. Very, very, very quiet. He kind of was very reluctant to speak, even when spoken to, and in combat. He was a farmer. He loved just being by himself and felt the need to take up arms when the army called.
Mhm.
He volunteered in 61 with the rest of the Tar Heels, and he ended up finding his end on the last day of battle at Gettysburg. And I met him actually, I don't want to say accidentally because everything does happen for a reason, but when we were visiting the angle, where Pickett's charge ended, um, he was kind of just like sitting there with like I'm trying to how I can explain this to the viewers too. Um, like one of those like old pictures of like him like with like one knee kind of arched with like the hand on the knee, just kind of just like observing but like resting
Mhm.
kind of position. And I remember I just like nodded to him just like do anytime I see anybody new, all the battlefields.
Right.
And very faintly he said, "Can I come with you?" And I knew he knew who I was because nobody just asked that unless
Right.
one of the guys goes out. Like usually Jamie's the loudmouth that goes around and says, "Hey, we're here. If you want to talk, he's here."
Mhm.
And like we'll say like, "Hey, like come find him," and he'll talk to you because he knows
Right.
how I am. I'm not going to say no to them.
Right.
So half the time when they say that, like I'm just like, "Hop in line, come on in," like
Right.
of course. Because if Jamie trusts them, I trust them. So that's just kind of
Sure.
a fair trade off. And when he said that, I was just kind of taken back because he was real soft spoken. I was like, of course, like you don't need to ask. Like you're obviously here for a reason.
Right.
And he like pointed over, and there was a real, real young kid, he was 18, 19 maybe, in his blue uniform, real close to the unit's monument. And he just pointed at him, and I said, "Are you okay?" Like just real softly to him, and he said, "Did we win the battle?" And I said, "Well, yes, you guys held the line, and your unit was credited for the reason that we held the line." And he turned and looked over at JJ and was like, "We almost killed each other, I saw him. And I was like,
Oh,
come again? Like, what did you just tell me?
yeah.
Like, they
Wow.
literally were on top of us. And when we were in hand to hand combat, I saw him. And then my world just went black. And he goes, I thought I killed him. And I asked him, how old
Oh.
are you? And he said, 18. And
Oh, wow.
I was like, I don't even think I could imagine going through that at 18. I
Any
couldn't
age.
imagine.
Any age. But
You know?
and let's just talk for a second about where they were. They were not exposed to the world like we are now.
Yeah.
They were not worldly people at all.
Yeah.
They had very simple lives. They had very simple upbringings.
Yeah.
And the idea of murder was battle is murder. It's a form of
Yeah.
murder. You don't ever forget that. That scars your soul.
Yeah.
That must have been absolutely incredible to see that.
Yeah. And I'm like sitting like my jaw on the floor as these two are like talking to me. I was like,
Oh
wait a
my
second. I was like,
goodness.
let me put two and two together here. It's like just
Yeah.
on a spin. I said, you're telling me that you met your end here, which means the history stories I've been learning are wrong because they told me that the Carolinians didn't reach the stone wall.
Right.
I said, so one, false.
Right.
And second of all, your guys are telling me that you were literally like feet from each other when you were both,
Mm,
mortally. And I was just like, what? I was like that. I'm like trying to wrap my head around this. And
right.
he just like simply nodded and he goes, he just said, like, I don't have a family anymore. Can I come with you? And I was like, well, of course. Like, don't ask.
Yeah.
You're you're with me. Like, stop. And I looked over at the young boy, and he's just like, am I allowed to? And I said, duh. I was like, that's why I'm here. Like,
Right. Right.
all more than welcome to come. And the second I said that, I saw a handful more just kind of like appear and like walk towards me. And I knew they were, they either heard that and were like, oh, I can show myself now. Or it was just kind of like oh, is this real kind of thing? And I
Yeah.
was like, oh shit, what did I just open myself up to? And that's why I laughed because I just scroll down through my list. I'm like, oh, I got you from there. I got you from there. I got you.
Right.
It's incredible. But their names, Jeremy, he he was just so quiet. And I think I figured out the exact spot where he may have fell in battle, but I'm not entirely sure. According to what he told me, he's buried in an unmarked grave in the National Cemetery. So history is a very good way of hiding things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's very few known Confederate burials on the battlefield, a lot of which were reinterred and moved south. Individuals,
Right.
but a lot were picked up and thrown into holes in what's now the National Cemetery, and were just labeled with a number, and a lot of which are actually just listed as U.S. unknown soldier.
That just breaks my heart. Every time I see that, it breaks my heart.
And I have an inkling feeling whenever I go through that cemetery that I know that they're not Union.
Yeah.
To me, like, it makes sense because they're all American soldiers to me. Like, that there's no
Well,
argument.
now they are. Yeah.
But when it comes down to it, I'm just like, can you please give them the proper something?
I know.
I wish they could, but I know with it being federal, there's too much. I don't need to get into that. But I have numbers written beside all of my Gettysburg Confederates because they were all buried in the National Cemetery, and I haven't been back there to find JJ's or any of these yet in the cemeteries. It's so hard for me to walk through these national cemeteries. I struggle every time I do it. But that was him, and then the young boy was a private. His name was Francis Beebs. He was a private in the 69th Pennsylvania Irish Volunteers. They were part of the Philadelphia Brigade that was formed in downtown Philadelphia. And Philadelphia, like Pittsburgh and every other major city, very heavy on the immigrants. And the funny thing that I found with the 69th Pennsylvania is that they are the sister regiment to my ancestors, the 69th New York, the founding regiment of the Irish Brigade. And the commanding general of the Irish Brigade, who also happens to be one of my followers, his wife presented the green battle flag to the 69th Pennsylvania as a gift, and kind of like putting them under their arm is like, hey, you're our sister regiment. Here's a cool
Nice.
flag.
That's awesome.
And I always thought that was incredible.
Yeah.
I learned his story, and I was like, man, you guys, you went through hell and back at Antietam, and once you get through that, you think you can get through anything.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're faced with the largest onslaught that's ever been seen to that date. And that's what just happens to be your number. You know, it breaks my heart because I do both sides every time I go to Gettysburg to, you know, pay my respects to both of them. But it's
Yeah.
always JJ being the quiet one that gets me to tears every single time.
Yeah.
You know, every time I even think about it, you know, because I'll go stand beside the North Carolina monument and I look out. I'm like, this is literally what he saw.
Yeah.
162 years ago now.
Right.
This is literally what he saw when they stepped off in that afternoon. And just a mile across that field is where he ended up taking his last breath. And it's just, I just can't wrap my head around it. It's so hard to believe.
It is.
They're incredible. I got several from the Irish Brigade. Imagine that. So where's the other one I had? Oh, here it is. Right. There's Jack. We'll get them. So this next story I got for you is very unique to me because I actually own something that belonged to him.
Really?
Unbeknownst to me, because I just happened to buy it when I was like 7 or 8 at Gettysburg for my very first time. My grandparents took me.
Okay.
I bought a Confederate 2-ring bullet from a gift shop, and it just was listed as, you know, Civil War bullets. And they said, you know, these are just relics that have been, you know, that we were selling that, you know, got sold to us from God knows where.
Right.
He said, you know, we don't know where all of them came from. They're just various, you know, from all over. And I was like, okay, cool. You know, I've always just wanted to own Civil War history. So just owning a bullet was just cool as hell to me. And that was my very first relic. And, you know, fast forward all this time later to as an adult when I can understand my ability, I started noticing that every time I would hold that said bullet, my hand would tingle. And I never understood the tingling. I didn't realize that I was just reading energy because that's what I do. That's my special.
Sure.
And I just remember holding it. I said, please tell me your name because I know you're here. I said,
Right.
who's connected to this bullet?
Right.
And all I heard was Ben. That's all he told me was Ben. And I was like, so there is somebody connected to this bullet. I said, okay. I said, can you tell me, Ben? I said, where is this bullet from? Gettysburg. I was like, well, yeah, that's where I bought it. I said, where was this bullet dug up at? Yeah, Gettysburg. And I was like, okay. It's like, that's interesting because, you know, relic hunting was ceased there in the 70s when it became a national park. So any genuine relic to Gettysburg is rare.
Right.
And I'm just sitting there holding it. And I said, did you die at Gettysburg? He's like, yeah. I was like, you just sound too confident and okay with this.
Right.
I was like, what is going on here? It's like, there's something special about this bullet, isn't there? He goes, that was my bullet. And I just stopped and went, oh, shit, what did I get myself into? And he said, no, please, you know, don't be scared. And he said, that was in my breast pocket. I was meaning to bring that home as a souvenir. Because I wanted something for my family to remember what I did, you know, in this war.
Wow.
And he said, I initially, you know, I took it out of my, you know, the cartridge or whatever, and I just, you know, slid it into my breast pocket. So one day when I made it home, that was my souvenir to, you know, remember the war. And he said, but whenever I was killed in battle, when they moved my body for burial, it fell out of the pocket.
Wow.
And he said it remained in the ground until it was dug up. And he said, now you have it.
Wow.
You know, that was my bullet.
Yeah.
And I like looked at him. I said, okay, so you're telling me this bullet was on your person at the time that you were killed? And he said, yeah. And he said, do you want me to show you where? And I said, well, obviously you can't just ask that and not show me. I was like, I'm curious as hell now.
Right.
So he showed me where it was, and my heart just sunk because I know that battlefield like the back of my hand, and I knew exactly where it was. I was like, you don't even need to tell me. I said, I'm not going to even tell you what they call that area now.
Right.
Because I know what you guys went through. I'm sorry, but thank you for showing me that.
Right.
He said, no, tell me, like, what do they call it? I said, that's what the area they call the slaughter pen. And he like kind of looked at me and was just like, makes sense. He goes, that was a very ill-advised attack from our command. And I said, yeah, you think? I was like, nobody in their right mind would even assault that position. I was
Right.
like, you have my respect. I said, you did one hell of a deed.
Right.
And he asked me, he goes, what happened there? I said, I think the war was lost for you guys there. Historians will disagree and argue and, oh, well, this happened. To me, my professional opinion, I think the tide was turned there for good.
Yeah.
And he just said, yeah, that makes sense. And I was just like, I don't mean to I don't want you to think like I'm talking ill on you guys. So it was like at
Right.
all. But it's just, from my understanding of what happened. And I just remember him saying, goes, the amount of men that fell in the volley before I fell should tell you everything that you need to know. And I was like, what's that supposed to mean? And he said, we were stuck in a crossfire and I wasn't getting out of there alive. I knew that. He goes, that's why I'm okay with telling you this. Like, I accepted the fact, like, oh my God, I'm about to die.
Right.
And I was like, how do you accept that though? I was like, I understand that you've been through at least four battles up to that point, but like, how does one conscious mind just be like, okay, this is my day? Walking into battle. Like,
no, that's a good question. And I have to say, so our generation that we're in right now is, and someone can correct me if this is incorrect information, but it's my understanding that the generation we're in right now is the 5th generation away from the biggest war that we just had.
mm-hmm.
And so our United States history is one that is more detached from war engagement than we ever have been in generations prior because of all of the big things that have happened war-wise. And so there's an attitude and a belief system that I'm a little concerned about as a human being because I feel like
Yes.
we have lost the reality of what war really means. There is nothing like television versus the real thing. Seeing battles in other countries and talking about devastation from weather or whatever traumatic events at a distance are not real on television. They are not real. You cannot process what that means from a distance. Being there and connecting and what you're connecting with these people and what they went through. I wish not for torment, but for education that people could connect in the same way because it feels very different. My first connection with a veteran was a reading I did back in Nevada for a gentleman that was a Vietnam vet, and he wanted to connect with someone that died in his unit. And the person that died in his unit died from a horrible wound on his right arm. And for anyone that doesn't know this, let me just share. When you're a medium, there are times that you feel what caused someone's death, whether it's losing your breath from something, heart attack, pain in your chest. And in this case, I mean, I know what it is now. When it first started happening, when I was a new psychic and a new medium, it scared the crap out of me.
It's hard to explain.
Yes, it's very hard to explain or describe, but in mine, it was an amputation and the incredible fire burning nerve pain that was in my right arm. I cannot put real clear words to describe what that feels like. And I'm positive that I don't have the full spectrum on it because I didn't go through the whole process. But he let me feel his arm coming off. And I say this only as a point of reference that war is so much more than people disagreeing.
Mm-hmm.
When people have made comments, and I know we don't like to be political, but it makes me feel sad and worried that there's ever any commentary anywhere about we're going to have another civil war. Not in my lifetime. I hope I never see that because I've felt it. I have felt it. You way more than I have. You've gotten knee deep in it. I don't ever want our country to go through that again.
Yep. I agree with you 100%. And like, part of me feels like it's coming for the sole fact, like, it's what's needed to hit the reset button to, like, really understand, like, what we have. But like you said, like, I keep telling myself every day, this is just a warning. This is just a warning. But when I live with these people every day and they tell me there's parallels going on, I
Yeah.
can't help but to open my eyes and just look at the spectrum of all over this country and just wonder,
Right.
is this really going to happen? And I don't, it scares me to listen to them because they're literally like 99% of the time right
Right.
with when I ask them, like, for guidance, so, like, if I'm on the right path and stuff like that.
Right.
And the fact that it's the same ones telling me, like, don't be surprised if something happens in the next couple of years.
Right.
And we're already seeing parallels to the lead up of what happened in 1861.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. It's not going to be the same, with North or South.
No.
We were a
Right.
smaller country back then, and so you know what I mean.
Right.
But I don't. It just makes me wonder: is like, are we going to see a full fledged war, or are we going to see, just kind of like what we're already seeing, just maybe on a larger scale? And
Yeah.
that just kind of makes me wonder because back then it was organized armies of, our states believe in this and the northern
Right.
states believed in that. So it was a lot easier to draw a line and form
Right.
structured armies. But now with being coast to coast, like, I don't know how that would even come to be. I hope
Right.
we never see it, but it sits in my mind because I live with this every day. Like, I understand that time period so well. Now I'm getting. I've been pretty deep in politics since I was in high school because I always felt it was important for younger generations to understand
Yes.
what goes on in our country, how it runs, and stuff like that. So understanding the politics of that time period, understanding what brought us to that point, not even like just the war itself, but the years leading up to. And then I turn around and look at the last, 10, maybe even just say 8 years. It's very clear what path we're slowly getting ourselves into, and,
Right.
tearing down of all the monuments and trying to erase like that said time period. That you're just asking for something to happen regardless if you're trying to get that to happen or not.
Right.
You don't
No,
put
if we
there.
have to learn from our past so
Yeah.
we don't repeat it. We have to learn from it. So let's head back to your list again and let's see where we left off.
All right. So next in line that I have starred, he's my youngest. He is only 16. I think he is 16, 17. He acts every bit of it. I call him my child just to piss him off. But he's a hard one for me to talk about just because there was a movie about him. In a way, he's a character in the movie. But he was a cadet at Virginia Military Institute, and he met a very, very young death at the Battle of Newmarket in 1864.
Okay.
And for anybody that doesn't know much about the Civil War, anything about the Civil War, the Battle of Newmarket was one of the only battles that included cadets. And cadets are students. They're learning. It's a military academy. These, they're on their way to the military, but not exactly in the military yet.
Right.
But during the Civil War, they were seen as what would today be called our National Guard. They're like the last line of defense. Not saying that they can't get activated because our National Guard does go overseas, but they're like they were students. They were learning. They were not actual military units, but were available to the military if needed. And at this point of the war was obviously going downhill for the Confederacy, and the Union were trying desperately to get to Richmond. And the Shenandoah Valley is literally just a strip between two lines of mountains, and it's all farmland. It's flat as can be. If anyone's ever been there, you'll understand. There's a reason why both armies fought rigorously the whole war up and down through the valley. It's an incredible landscape to see if you ever get the chance to go there. but Newmarket sits kind of like the bottom portion of it. And the Union Army was marching down through, and Lee was already occupied with Grant up in Virginia, up in Northern Virginia, and couldn't spare any troops on this advance. And ironically enough, the Confederate commander was a former United States Vice President, John Breckinridge.
Okay.
And he was faced with an impossible decision, and he said, "I don't have enough troops. We got to call the cadets."
Wow.
And whenever like I read that and that story, I'm just saying to myself, like, how do you like consciously be like, you know what, I gotta get these kids in here. Like I need help. So he sent out the order. They were given the order to march, and they packed their gear and headed up from Winchester to Newmarket. It was a 2-day march. They made it up into camp, and Breckinridge specifically told them, "You are not to see battle. You are solely here for reserves."
Okay.
To help, our body, like our numbers. And he promised him, because I promise you, I'll keep you protected, but I need you here.
Right.
Well, as war would have it, the battle did not, start out to plan for the Confederates.
Right.
And in the dead center of the battlefield is the Bushong farm. It's just a standard farmhouse and farm. And both armies were fighting from hillside to hillside on opposite sides.
Okay.
And it's real hilly in this area, in this terrain. The cannons held the high ground, and the infantry used the different heights to hide and take cover. And on the Bushong farm was the main Confederate battle line. And the Union Army was more in the open, but they had the numbers. They had the strength in numbers and high ground with artillery to support their infantry. And they blasted a gap in the Virginian line that was on the Bushong farm. And Breckinridge noticed that, and he looked up, and his helper, his adjutant, said, "Sir, we need to put in the reserves." He goes, "There's a massive gap there." He goes, "Yeah, I see it." He goes, "Sir, you had to send in the cadets." He goes, "We need to send in the reserves." He goes, "We need to fill that hole." And he goes, "I know, quit telling me." And he goes, "Well, what are we going to do?" He said, "God," and I believe this was his direct quote. He said, "God rest my soul, but send in the boys."
So can you tell me, do you know how old these cadets were, what their age ranges were?
As young as 13 up to as old as 18.
Yikes.
Yeah, boys.
And so even though at this time in our history, we know that the average lifespan of a human was in their 30s.
Yeah.
People did not, if you were 45, you were like what we consider a 92-year-old now.
Yeah.
Very different in lifespan. So even though they were halfway through their life in some cases, they were still children.
Yeah.
They were still kids. Their brains weren't fully developed. That doesn't happen until we're 24 years old.
Mm-hmm.
24. And so their bodies are still growing. They're barely in puberty for some of them.
Yep.
And they're having to make adult battle actions.
Yep.
That's hard to wrap your brain around. That's hard to fathom.
Yep. So the cadets were told to follow the lead of the unit that was the actual infantry regiment that they were attached to.
Right.
And at this point in the war, all these units are battle worn. Like this isn't their first rodeo.
Right.
And they directed to the cadets, like, "Hey, like, you need to stay with us. Like, I promise you, like, if you want to live, you need to haul tail down there to the next gully to take cover." So they said, "Okay, it's time. Let's move." And that unit took off running, where the cadets stayed in formation and marched down in perfect military fashion. And somehow they avoided receiving any casualties, even though all the cannons were focused on them coming down the hill. And it literally like shocked all the veteran troops. Were like, those kids literally just walked and didn't, like, nothing happened. Like they weren't even phased. And then they ended up making it up to the point where they had a charge to the front. And that was when the casualties started to begin. I believe, I can't remember the exact number of cadets that were killed in the Battle of Newmarket, but they, lost, decent handful of, the kids were killed,
Right.
several after, falling to the elements of their injuries.
Right.
But, needless to say, they charged to the front. And as they were making their way up, the Union Army was focusing on them as being, because they were in the center, like they were the dead center of the line. And I'm not too entirely sure how it came to be, but he was trying to protect one of his friends and pushed him out of the way and took the volley to save his friend.
Mm.
And every time I watched the movie, and they portrayed like pretty accurately, but I'm not too sure if it was exactly how it happened or not. But they were trying to charge the Union guns to capture the position to win the battle. And that's when they realized, oh, hey, reinforcements are coming up, we're about to get unloaded on. And he just said, nope, you're too important. And he took it for, he took the volley himself. And it breaks my heart, because every time I talk about him, I get emotional. But when you get to know him as a person, he is the farthest thing from emotional. He's a prankster. He's a jokester. All he does is laugh. He's the reason why I laugh half the time, because him and Jamie get along a little bit too well.
And what was did you say what the name of the movie is that's about him?
It's called The Field of Lost Shoes.
Okay.
It's on Prime Video if anybody has Prime Video. But his name, he was Cadet Jack Stannard. He was part of the company of cadets, and he's one of the 6 that are buried at VMI.
Okay. So
after the battle, a lot of the cadets were buried at a local cemetery by their classmates and friends. But at some point, they were the ones that they know of that were able to be found, that were just publicly buried, were reinterred at VMI as a remembrance. And every year on the anniversary of the Battle of Newmarket, the cadets of VMI have a special drill ceremony in honor of the cadets.
I have to ask you, Sage, what was it like for you to watch that movie after meeting this soul? What was that like for you?
Hard. It was very hard, because I actually talked to all of the cadets that were involved in the movie. Like, all his friend group is basically what was the ones that were focused on. One of which in particular, there's been a lot of issue in the country dealing around him, as he was a sculptor, Moses Ezekiel.
Okay.
He was one of the cadets that fought at Newmarket, and he was he was Jewish, came from a very wealthy family, and decided to make a difference when he could, and that's why he decided to join up with the VMI. And he survived the war. He survived Newmarket, and whenever I don't know if it was always a passion of his, because he was very good at writing, but he always wanted to be a sculptor. And in the movie, I had to laugh, because there's a scene where John Breckenridge comes and talks to them, and they all introduce themselves, and he's like, yeah, I want to be a sculptor. And he looked at him and was like, why? There's no money in that.
Right.
But would you not believe he became one of the most famous sculptors this world's ever seen?
That's amazing.
His work can be seen all over the world. He lived in Paris until he was in his 90s, and he came back to the United States and was actually present for one of the last reunions for the Newmarket.
Oh yeah.
The Battle of Newmarket, whatever. And he passed not long after, and he was buried in Arlington National Cemetery underneath his Reconciliation Monument, or at the foot of it. And it was a giant monument that portrays slaves breaking out of chains, and 2 soldiers with both, from the North and South, shaking hands. And there's some biblical phrase he incorporated in it, but the whole idea of it was our country coming back together as one.
Finally, yes, right.
And I don't know how many people pay attention to what's going on, but that monument was actually torn down a few years ago by the Department of Defense. And
That one was?
yes, it was labeled a Confederate monument and it was removed without a federal order. And a lot of people, when that one happened, a lot of people went, okay, wait a second here. This is not political, for one. It's a reconciliation monument. And second of all, you literally have a crane on the man's grave to take that down. And I was like,
That's
oh,
almost criminal to me. I can't believe that was
I
done.
can only imagine the storm that's
Mm,
come from this. You can label it anti-Semitism because he was Jewish. You can label it as hate, for this reason, that reason. Like there's a list of reasons of why that was wrong. And
yeah, clearly.
like they literally
Wow.
people stood up and went, okay, this needs to stop, and actually started fighting with the courts, and we're winning case after case and delaying it and delaying it and delaying it.
Right.
And then all of a sudden the government stepped in and said, nope, it's gone, and just removed it, even though there was literally court battles still going on. And people had an obvious issue with that. But one thing that President Trump did do was when after he was elected and put back in office, he put that monument back up. Now I haven't been to
It
Arlington,
should have been put back up. Yeah.
but I remember reading that he ordered the replacement of that monument. And I was like, that's if there's any monument that was torn down that got put back up, God bless it be that one.
Right.
We
No, that's
country
I
needs
agree.
help,
Well, there's a movie, I think it's called Monuments Men. Does that
Yes.
sound right, Sage?
Yes.
Okay. As a kid, I grew up listening to some World War II stories, some World
Mhm.
War I, small amounts. But I remember when I watched that movie for the first time, it struck me. My first thought was, why are all these people trying to save pictures and paintings and statues? What on earth is the big
Yeah.
deal? And then the more I watched the movie, the more I thought, oh my God, that's our history. Those
Yeah.
are not just art. Those
Yeah.
are part of our lives.
Yeah.
That's part of who we are and where we came from. And all of that matters. And some of it was awkward and strange. And, the statues that were naked that were considered beautiful when they were made and then
Yeah.
became obscene because their penis showed
Yeah.
or
Exactly.
their boob showed or whatever. And it was like,
Yep.
really? You know, so history's imperfect and we're imperfect by far, but
Yeah.
history needs to be saved is the long run.
Yes.
Okay, so who's next on our list?
So I'll go down the line. So we talked about the handful that are with me. So I have a couple generals that like to show themselves around my home. It's kind of interesting. I'm trying to make sure I didn't pass up on anybody else that I've written down that are with me on a daily. So I pretty much nailed the ones that I talk to and hang out with the most. The other ones come and go for say and just
Mhm.
talk when they want to. But
Right.
the next one we'll talk about. You actually saw him. I think it was the very first time we spoke.
Mhm.
He was the one that was lingering over my shoulder, wondering what
Yes.
was going on.
Right.
He is my favorite because he's always been a role model to me. He's always been an idol of mine, especially in Civil War research,
Mhm.
and never understood that he was with me until one day he just showed up, and I was like, "Oh, hello." um, he's the commander of the Irish Brigade from the North. Thomas Francis Marr is his
Yeah.
name. And he lived an interesting life. He was a drinker, as every Irish is.
Right.
Imagine that. He came over from Ireland mostly because he was kicked out of Ireland. He was part of the Irish Revolution movement to free Ireland from English control.
Right.
And I'm trying to think of a polite way of putting it that he was a little out there when it came to what the Irish revolutionists did to
Right.
their movement. But he was exiled from Ireland somehow, or he was actually put to death. He was supposed to be killed from the government, but
Right.
he somehow got out, wound up in Australia, I think is what it was, and then somehow, some way, found his way to New York City. It's an interesting story. I don't understand the whole because it's all blurry and there's not a whole lot of documentation. But
Right.
regardless, he wound his way up in the United States in New York City. And he was a part of the 69th New York State Guard,
Right.
which was the unit my ancestor fought in at First Manassas, ironically enough. At the time of First Manassas on April 21st, 1861, Thomas Marr was just a captain. But he kind of carried that, like, that leadership role too, like a
Sure.
T. Like, even if you didn't know he was a captain, you looked at him and went, "Wow, like he's going to be someone, like
He's a leader.
just
Yeah.
had passion that you knew
Right.
to follow that man if you wanted to get through." And the song that I mentioned before that I played for the young man at Manassas, it sings about how whenever the Irish were called into action, the Confederates actually took Henry Hill. And the first battle of Manassas was like almost like a Revolutionary War battle. Like they were like just mere yards from each other when unloading because they were using smoothbore muskets still.
Right.
And Stonewall Jackson was on the other side, and the Union Army marched down, and his men cut him down, and then they countercharged, and they ended up taking Henry Hill. But what isn't seen in the movie Gods and Generals is whenever that happened, the Union said, "Okay, time to counterattack." And one of those regiments that was sent forward was the 69th. And they were attached to a New York regiment that they call, of course, the name's going to slip my mind now. They wore like the French uniforms. They looked like Santa Claus uniforms.
Okay.
And they were Zouaves. That's the name of it. I knew it'll come.
Okay.
But they were an attachment to them as they were not a technical infantry regiment. They were just a state guard.
Right.
But it was all Irishmen and Irish-born firefighters that picked up a rifle in the time of need for the battle.
Right.
And they said, hey, like, let's go. It's our time. And whenever the Zouaves charged forward, they were struggling to get ground. But the Irish colonel took his sword and said, "We're taking that hill." And would you not believe the Irish charged forward and took that hill?
Oh, I believe it.
They were the only Union regiment on that day to achieve their actual goal.
Wow.
And I mean, it's not surprising considering this is the first battle of the war that nobody knew anything about. But it just the fact that they are the ones that took the initiative to say, "No, we're getting this done."
Right.
Well, when the colonel was wounded, it was Thomas Marr that stood up and rallied the men to continue on and to continue fighting. And everybody kind of just went to him because he was always the favorite over the colonel, because the colonel was not the best of people. I learned a lot about him, and there's a reason I don't mention him much.
Gotcha.
Because he did try infiltrating and coming with me. And I was fine with that at first before I knew who he was. And I learned about him and his life and how he can cause issues with my rank. And that's when I kind of politely asked him to leave.
Yeah.
The only one I had to do that with.
So I got to throw something out really quick that just came to mind.
Sure.
So one of these days when you have a day off, which I know is going to be a while because it's the cold season.
Yes.
But I want to have like a live thing with you and take you with me and Doug, my husband, to this one cemetery, because so my spirit guides told me a couple of years ago that I was going to need to do a tour of cemeteries that I hadn't seen yet in my area. And so there was this one dinky, tiny, original hometown cemetery we found in the foothills of our area. And we weren't there very long. And this group of military men approached me in formation.
Yeah.
And they were like, "What are you doing here? What do you want? Why are you here? Nobody comes here." It's an old cemetery.
Yeah.
But I love that they were protecting the cemetery. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And once we got to talking, everything was fine. And they were like, "Oh, she's no problem." But it was, their uniforms blew me away because people think, military graves, military cemetery, but that didn't happen for a long time.
Yeah. A very long time. Yeah.
There's been a lot of military burials all over the place. And a lot of families, to their credit, were like, "I want my husband, my son, my brother, where I can go see him."
Yeah.
I don't want them somewhere where I don't know where they are,
Yeah.
And
Right.
so, but I love that their energy is so, they're right there.
Yeah.
They in their minds, that's their job. That's what they're doing.
Yep. And that's what every single one of my soldiers does, literally.
Yeah. They're super active.
Yep.
They're not tired. They're not ready to lay down. They're ready to do whatever needs to be done.
Yep. And they're there on a moment's notice when needed too.
Yes. And they are they're not depressing at all, which you would think someone that had been through a war would just be a mess. And I know I've met several spirits that have definite PTSD. They
Yes.
definitely have things that they're dealing with, and they will forever in that energy until they get
a handful like that. It's
Yes.
tough because you're trying to help them break that, but when they show you what's causing it, it almost triggers it in you. It's not easy to break that of them.
No. And if they're not ready to move on,
Mhm.
they're not ready, and that's all right.
Exactly. That's why
I totally don't mind that.
Here.
Yeah. I don't blame them. That's
Yeah.
jarring. And to know what they might have to do again, why would you leave?
Yep.
Why wouldn't you just
I
stay?
looked through my list and I marked down where I found, initially made contact with them.
Mhm.
And I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like, so am I your middle ground? Like, are you coming to me as like almost like a therapist? Or
Mhm.
is it like one of those things where it's just like, oh, finally someone can hear what I went through? It's like tell the story. Cause that's why I laugh now. And it's my nerd side coming out.
Yeah.
They tell me stuff about the battle, right?
Yeah.
And then I go and research the hell out of the battle. And then
Sure.
I'll find a discrepancy and I'll say, wait a second, you told me this. He goes, well, yeah, that's how it happened. And I was like, so you're telling me the national park's wrong? And he's like, sure.
Correct.
And I'm like, And I always laugh because Thomas Mard, he's a very passionate person when he speaks.
Yeah.
He controls the room. When he talks, you listen.
Right.
And I was researching the Battle of Chancellorsville because I found out I bought a bullet that came from Chancellorsville.
Okay.
And the soldier that came with was the Irish Brigade. So, of course, I was like immediately drawn.
Right.
And I asked Thomas, I said, what did you do or what happened there that led to what happened afterwards? Because that was his last battle as the commander.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
ended up resigning his commission as commanding general after Chancellorsville.
Right.
And I said, like, what happened? And he said, can I just show you? And I was like, that's usually easier.
Yeah.
So he showed me the Chancellor House, and he showed it to me on fire. It was towards the end of the battle. And he said they were given the task, hold the line as long as you can so we can get out.
Okay.
And I'm sitting thinking to myself, was like, so you're throwing your hardest fighting unit that you're not letting reinforce their numbers and recruit more recruits in as the guinea pig to take even more casualties so your whole army can escape. That's what I'm seeing here.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's not fair. I was like, now I understand why you resigned. And he said, it's not that I didn't love those men because God knows I would have died for them. But I can't, in my righteous mind, keep sending them into battle knowing I can't get them more help.
So remember the Mel Gibson movie?
Which one?
The Patriot, I think it's called?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And his story is very damn close to how that movie plays out, which is very interesting.
So for those listening and watching, if you have never heard this before, The Patriot is based on the histories of 3 different men that actually went through that. Mm-hmm. And so the story about the fighting with the rocking chair, trying to get it to not fall over and do that's real. Fighting with a tomahawk, that's real. I mean, everything about a lot of the story is from actual factual diaries and accounts that are documented. Yep. That story was built on an actual set of lives, not just 1, but 3. And of course it was, depicted for our viewing pleasure on a movie screen. But these people, I had a conversation with someone this morning at like 6 in the morning. Okay. You know, your spirit guides wake your butt up and say, get up, you're going to do this. Blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. Okay. Stumble
Yeah.
to the kitchen, hit the coffee button. Please. I need coffee.
Yes.
But I had this conversation with someone who said, I went through all this stuff yesterday. It was horrible, but I think I went through it so that I would figure out how strong I am.
Yeah.
And this person said, it sucked while it was happening, but I get it now. I'm way more capable than I thought I was. I was really not giving myself the grace that I'm smarter than I think. I'm stronger than I think. I'm way stronger than I ever thought I needed to be because I got tested to my limits. And I think these military spirits, people that have been through a lot of crap, are the strongest people. They are amazing.
Yes.
They have incredible stories. And I love, as I know you do, I love to hear them. I love to get a moment of their life. When I do readings for people, I say, thank you for sharing a moment of your life with me because it means everything to me.
Yeah.
It means everything to me. I don't know why I can do it.
Yeah.
But I know that I can, and I know that I do.
Exactly.
I know that I know. So I'm really grateful that you are calling yourself a medium because it wasn't too long ago that you weren't even saying that. So I'm really proud of you, Sage, because that's a big step to say I'm this thing.
It's like I've always accepted and I've always known it, but it's just one of those things. It's like, how do I properly label myself? Because it's like I know like I've practiced a lot as like spiritual healing, and like that's what I do. Like I help people, you know, with my gift.
Yeah.
But also the same hand, like I do give mediumship readings. I do all that too.
Yeah.
So it's like I like always like struggled with like, okay, what do I actually label myself? You know? Like, do I even want to label myself? You know, it's like one of those things I always go back and forth with. But then, you know, I look around my room and just like look over my shoulder and see a smiling face looking at me.
Yeah.
I know I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm grateful. We had to go run to the store today, and I was flipping through. We always leave the TV on for the guys that live with us, and for the dog, of course, because she needs noise. And I'm flipping through, and this John Candy movie popped up, and I'd never heard of it before. And one of the girls goes, I'd watch that. And I went, okay.
Yeah.
And I love that they can talk to me. I love that I can hear them. I'm still a normal person. I'm still stumbling to get my coffee in the morning and stubbing my toe when I'm not paying attention and doing all that normal people stuff. But I am so grateful for one specific reason. I know that I know that I know that there's more out there. I know that there's life beyond us. We're not done when we're done here. We're not done. And for anyone that's, I'm just going to, a quick PA, and you can help me with this. So someone that has lost a family member, friend, or loved one, we know, we can tell you with very great confidence, they're not gone.
Yep.
They're still there.
And for the people watching, that flag that's sitting right up on my mantle right here is true testament to that.
Yeah.
So that my grandfather's with me every day.
Yeah. And he hasn't been gone very long, so I know that's not easy for you to share. So thank you for sharing that. When my grandfather shows up, my great grandfather shows up more than the others. He was the one that did seances in Chicago in the 1920s.
Okay.
And so he always shows up in a suit. And it's a 1920s suit. It's got the little pinstripes and the bigger lapel. And he always has his hair slicked back. And he's been saying this thing to me regularly: represent yourself well. And he always says it like that.
Yep.
He's very pointed. Represent yourself well. And it's like, I love the way he talks. I love the way he says stuff.
Yep.
But I love that I can hear him. And I wish everybody could have that connection with someone that they've lost.
Yes.
They're there. They are still there. They love you. They're not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
They're still there.
Just like how I know I can't see a lot of my soldiers half the time, but the heavy presence I'm feeling over my left shoulder, I know that there's somebody glaring, and I know
Yes.
exactly who it is because he keeps showing his face every time I blink.
Yes. Yes.
And it's who I'm talking about. That's why I said that, because he's over
Yep.
my shoulder like he was that first time.
Uh-huh. And he looked over and said, "Who is this tart?" Because
I told you he's very passionate with his.
oh yeah, he's sassy as hell.
I've learned a few words from him that I'm pretty proud of.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I can't even try to enunciate them, but
Okay.
it's Gaelic for what we usually use on a daily basis. We'll put it that way.
Okay. I actually have a thing that I get in my email for Gaelic because I've always wanted to learn it
Hmm.
because it's a cool language. I
Very
don't know, and I try to learn Latin. I'm goofy. I definitely am a nerd's nerd.
Yep.
I am so very nerdy. People have no idea. And when you talk about guns, I geek out. I used to sell guns, very modern versions, but I learned quite a bit about old Flint style guns
Yes.
over the years. And yeah, I'm a nerd's nerd. When I learn about stuff, I'm like you. I dig in like it's the first bowl of spaghetti I ever had. I have to have it all. I want all of it. I dig and dig and dig and read and read and read because
Yep.
there's so much I've never seen or heard of, and I love to learn more. So
Yep.
yeah, I
You
love
dare
it.
introduce me to a new battle, you better give my girlfriend a good excuse on why I'm glued to my phone.
Exactly.
I can't put it down until I know enough that I'm
Right.
confident I can tell the story without looking.
Right. No, that's totally fair. That's cool. That's
Yes.
awesome.
And I
That's
just
awesome.
I love talking about Thomas More because his story of how it started to how
Mhm.
it ended is just true testament to who he was. You know, he wanted like to keep, the numbers going because, the Irish Brigade was made up of 3 New York regiments that were all from New York City
Mhm.
and the, surrounding area of New York City. One came from Pennsylvania. That
Mhm.
was, I believe, we sent just a couple of companies from here in Pittsburgh,
Right.
but majority of the regiment was founded in Philadelphia.
Right.
And then Massachusetts sent a regiment from Boston to the Irish
Well,
Brigade.
and that makes sense because those were more populated.
Correct.
They got their numbers from the more populated areas.
And there was obviously more and more coming in. Immigration was very heavy back then.
Yeah.
And he struggled to even get Congress to approve an all Irish brigade because they didn't want it to be, a political thing. They didn't want it to be like a religious thing, like any form of
That's right.
there's a reason to why like they didn't, they like kept regiments mixed, but they said, you know what, we know that you guys, you might be rowdy, you might be drunk 90% of the time, but when it comes down to it, you guys fight hard and get the job done.
Yeah.
And after First Manassas, he was very quickly promoted to colonel of the now formed 69th New York Infantry.
Wow.
And it wasn't very long after that he got his commission as brigadier general to raise the Irish Brigade.
Right.
And when you read about it and how he formed it with just the 3 regiments,
Mhm.
and then he was promised the 28th Massachusetts before Antietam, but the regiment wasn't formed in time, so they gave them the 29th Massachusetts for the Battle of Antietam, which ironically was
Right.
all German and Dutch soldiers.
That's amazing.
German and Dutch did not get along with the Irish, so the fact that there was one
No.
sole regiment tied in with an all-Irish brigade was hilarious to me.
Mhm. Oh, I'm
But
sure.
they fought very well together. They fought with honor together.
Yeah.
And the Irish, took heavy losses at Antietam, but
Mhm.
afterwards they were then reinforced with another full regiment. And then just before Fredericksburg, at the end of '62, they were given the 116th Pennsylvania. That was the Pennsylvania regiments. Now we're up to 5 full regiments. The 3 New York regiments got beaten and battered at Antietam, but they were able to replenish their numbers. They went into Fredericksburg in December of '62 with around
Right.
3,000 men. They left Fredericksburg with somewhere in the ballpark of 1,700.
Yeah, that's just
And if I can
Mm.
I can say this because the ghosts, like how you were just talking about how your ghosts love to watch TV. We've watched Gods and Generals and Gettysburg a very unhealthy amount of times because that's their favorite movie.
But I get it because that's something they can totally relate to.
And the Battle of Fredericksburg, portrayed in Gods and Generals, is one of the best representations that you can watch that accurately depicts what happened.
Right.
And for the listeners and viewers that haven't really, seen it or know, what that even was, once in the army captured the town, the Confederates took to the high ground, which was Mary's Heights, and they literally, for the first time in the war, had cover. Like, it was like the first modern era combat. They took a defensive line on the sunken road and behind a stone wall, and then had a ridge behind that where their artillery was positioned, and they defended a mile-long uphill slant from the town.
Right.
And when the Union Army massed at the other end of the creek, the second they went to the bridges that the Confederates intentionally left to cross the creek, that was the zero in point for the artillery. So the second that they stepped off from their staging point, they were getting shelled. And the whole way up the hillside, they were eating artillery rounds. And then when they hit about that 1,200-yard mark, then all of a sudden these little bullets started zinging by them. And they ate that all the way up to their firing position. So a lot of them lost almost quarter to half strength before they were even able to return fire.
But can you fathom? It's hard for me to wrap my brain around. Tell me those numbers again, what they started with and what they wound up with.
Yeah, so the Irish Brigade walked into Fredericksburg with somewhere around 3,000 men and left with around 1,700.
Right.
And
almost half.
Make that number even worse, this is just perspective of time. The Battle of Fredericksburg was December of 1862. It was like middle of the month.
Right.
Not even 6 months or 7 months later, July 2nd, 1863, the Irish Brigade marched into Gettysburg with 900 men.
That gives me chills.
The 28th Massachusetts had less than 100 men to the regiment.
Oh my God.
A regiment's supposed to have 1,000 men. They were literally used as a company. The brigade marched into Gettysburg under one flag because the regiments were so dwindled in numbers that they fought as one regiment, but they were a brigade. And
I want to put this back up again just for a second.
And to explain to you guys, viewers and listeners here, a brigade is 4 to 5 regiments, and a regiment consists of 1,000 men each, give or take. It's usually between like anywhere in the ballpark of like 700 to 1,000 men. So when you're dwindling 5 regiments down to the strength of just one, that just goes to show you how many were lost in a 7-month span.
So in this picture I have on the screen, there's 4 guys and the shoulder of another guy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can think that you started out with all these men around you, all these people around you, and then it comes down to just you.
Yep.
You're all that's left.
And
that'd be crazy.
From the visions I've seen from Fredericksburg, it's very chilling to know that picture and your explanation right there actually happened. Mm-hmm. The second one artillery shell burst, all of a sudden all your friends that are beside you, you look around and you're the only one standing because that shell just wiped everybody out. Yeah. And the fragmentation just happened to miss you.
Yeah.
That's what they walked through for a mile, straight uphill. And we talk about how the Confederates lost the war at Gettysburg, marching up impossible odds up these steep hillsides. Right. What do you think the Union did literally the winter before?
Right.
And it's just the whole war in general in the East. That's what happened. Just battle after battle. Whoever had the high ground, you slaughtered the other side. You marched out with a great victory. And then a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, you meet on another field and roles are reversed, and all of a sudden you're the one trying to dislodge and you guys get beaten down. That's just all that kept happening. But this was the first time that we saw what happened when an army was entrenched.
Right.
The Confederates had cover. They were behind a stone wall. The Union Army marched up a mile-long hillside.
Right.
And once they got close enough, not only they taking rifle fire, but the cannons are loading canister shot, which is basically a coffee can that you can imagine being, a little bit wider than, probably for our viewers, you can see, but it's about, wide. Probably
the
about
size of a grapefruit.
Yeah,
basically.
grapefruit.
Yeah.
And inside that canister, that coffee can, is about a dozen iron balls that are about the size of a golf ball.
Mm-hmm.
And when that cannon shot, that canister just splits off, and all those iron balls get shot out like a giant buckshot.
Yep.
So you're sending solid shot through people from close range. That can tear out a whole line. And when they got close enough, there's times artillery were loading double canister. They're putting two shells in the barrel at once, doubling the spread and effective line. So they're taking out sections of the battle line approaching before they even get anywhere remotely close.
Right.
And that's not counting the solid shot that was being skipped across the ground as they were coming up, and the explosive shot that's blown up all around them. There's regiments that got completely wiped out at Fredericksburg. And, a lot of people don't talk about, because you look at the map and you see just the sliver of defensive line for the Confederates. Right. And then the broad, you zoom out, and all of a sudden you see the Union lines like this. And the lines like this. And you're sitting there wondering, how did they lose? I was like, you're marching uphill on constant fire. That's how you lose.
Yeah.
They had 4 deep in the trenches. That one man in the front, all he had to do was shoot. You pull that trigger, you hand the rifle back, someone's loading. It was an assembly line. One person opened the cartridges, the other one, loaded it. So on and so forth, all the way down the line. So that one person in front just going, boom, okay, next one, boom, okay, next one, and just kept going.
Right. But what kills me about this is, as vivid as this is, if we don't remember these stories, if we don't focus on what happened, the people that we've elected to represent us don't try hard enough to sort out our differences, and we don't try hard enough to see another point of view.
Yes.
So I am so glad that we chatted today, because we're going to have to keep going with this. Yep. And I have some other stuff I'll share with you offline, because I think there's some things you and I could do to help share some more stories that I think would be really helpful. I love history. I'm a history geek. I love hearing all these stories. They're amazing. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, Sage, and ask you more specific questions, can you share how people can do that, please?
Certainly. So I'm on Facebook at Sage Gatto. It's SAGEGATTO. I'm also on Instagram under my ghost hunting handle. It's the Still City, STEEL City Ghost Chasers. I'm also on TikTok under the same handle as well. Just reach out to me on any platform. I'm always on my phone, so I'll pretty much see anything at any time. But please, any questions, any concerns, or even want to just chat about history, I'm always open to that. And if you don't mind, there's one note about Fredericksburg I want to leave that, because it's something I'm proud of, being an ancestor of men that fought in the Irish Brigade.
Yeah.
The Irish always took pride in being the best at everything, especially in the war, even with no numbers. They during the Battle of Fredericksburg, only one regiment had their battle flag, because they were all sent back to New York for repairs.
Right.
So General Marr ordered his men to wear sprigs of boxwood in their kepis. It's a simple Irish just nod, so they knew hey, that's the Irish coming at us. And that was the only battle they did it. And I wear a kepi. I have all my history stuff, and I keep a sprig of boxwood in my kepi.
Tell people what a kepi is.
A kepi is the hat that the soldiers wore back then. There was several models, but the kepi was the primary one.
Yes.
So it was just a simple design, just cap that they wore.
It's a small cap. Yeah.
Yes. And I keep fall boxwood on hand, just so I don't have to constantly deal with the real stuff. But
nice.
I keep a sprig in my hat, and remembrance of my ancestors and those who I choose to represent. And the story that I just love near and dear, regardless of the bloodshed that happened there, is there's a direct quote that came from a diary from a Confederate soldier, and said, So basically, I'm gonna give a little. I almost jumped myself here.
That's okay.
The Battle of Fredericksburg was what defined brother versus brother, as one of the front regiments in the center of the wall was actually a Confederate Irish regiment.
Hmm.
And they had the wonderful joy of shooting at their own countrymen as they were coming up the hillside. And for us, like we think like, oh, big deal. Like we had there were siblings that shot each other at every battle.
Yes.
The first time that we saw Irish shoot Irish
Yeah.
on U.S. soil,
Right.
and that was something that was very hard for them to even want to do, let alone
Right.
accept. But there was a diary that quoted says, "Would you not be surprised? The first kepi that we found on the ground closest to Mary's Heights was that of a sprig."
Oh.
And he left it at that, and everybody knew that.
Mm-mm-mm. Right.
And they said the closest to their objective was nothing more than the Irish. And that is out of 162 fighting units, I think is the number, that assaulted Murray's Heights on that day, and the Irish got the closest.
Yeah.
And whenever they read that, if you get the chance to visit what's left of the battlefield today,
Mm-hmm.
Fredericksburg, it breaks my heart because all that's left is the sunken road on Murray's Heights because they built up the city, obviously as time
Right.
progressed. But the National Cemetery and Murray's Heights is all that remains. When you walk that sunken road, the tree line is roughly about 500 yards or so from the sunken road, maybe less than that. And they tell you it is almost intentional because that tree line is where the Irish were.
Wow.
That's how close they got. And when you get there and look out and realize that you could throw a rock to where they were, that's close.
That's incredible.
They took a beating there for a reason because they were a stone's throw from that stone wall.
Right.
And that's something that I wear with pride every time I put my kepi on because
Sure.
the bravery that they showed that day is something I can't ignore.
It's not just bravery, the fortitude
Yes.
to stay after all that they saw and dealt with and lost.
Yep.
No supplies, no getting their shoes replaced,
Yep.
no new blankets,
Yep.
very few bandages. They were using their clothes for bandages, barely any food to eat. Those people were starving.
Yep. And the fact that they kept going regardless of their losses from Fredericksburg to Chancellorsville to Gettysburg.
Right.
Through the end of the war, they stayed fighting even though they just kept beaten and beaten down. That did not stop them.
No.
And that's my heritage. That's
Right.
my blood. That's my
amazing.
pride. And when I learned that almost all of these came from an Irish heritage, I know that they were all fighting with the same spirit.
Yeah.
And then, you learn about that. You learn about what these men went through as individuals, Irish
Right.
companies, Irish regiments, Irish individuals
Right.
that were scattered throughout the South. They
Yep.
all carried that same fighting spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's very true.
it's just, if there's anybody that's listening that has any form of connection to the war, you'll understand this. But it's just one of those things where it hits different when like you said before, when you know.
Yeah.
And with these men that I talk to daily, and I go to these battlefields and I see their monuments and I touch them, I know what this represents. It's not just a
Right.
monument to the regiment; it's to the fighting spirit that brought them
Right.
to be there.
Exactly.
It's
a whole different mentality.
And especially now that at Antietam, they decided to put up a new Irish Brigade monument. Of course, there's a few names on there that are on this list that's sitting on my phone.
Sure.
That's incredibly difficult for me to read because I just
bet.
God, why did they have to do that? But in a way, it made me smile because I'm looking at what almost like work that I figured out years ago.
But that's amazing. The fact that you can link the two in personal experience.
Yeah.
In 2025.
Yeah.
That's a miracle.
Yeah.
That really, really is.
Almost 90% of the graves are not known anymore because they were given wooden crosses.
Yeah, which
And
rotted and are not there anymore in most cases.
yep. So I'm going around the country getting names that are now forgotten. So that's why I do this.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you much for coming on tonight, Sage.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad. And we'll do this again soon.
Absolutely.
And for those of you that are watching this, if you like this content, please hit the like button. It doesn't cost you anything. It takes 2 seconds. Move your remote and just hit the like button for me. It makes a huge, huge difference.
Yep.
And subscribe if you want to hear more stuff. We have all kinds of stuff that comes up. I interview everybody. I don't care if somebody's famous or not. I talk to everybody because everybody's got a story.
Yep.
And I love the stories so much. This is Holly from Holly's Pandorium saying thank you for coming here. Thank you for hanging out. And with Sage, we want to say thank you for joining us, and we'll talk again soon. Have a good day.